Hey, welcome back, everybody. Today we are going to talk about um, data collection. So we are here in week 8 on the syllabus. Last time we talked about methods, and the big takeaway there that I just want to boil everything down to, because as you'll notice, that's due next week, not the end of this week, but the end of next week, is that you want to think of it almost like a recipe as you write it. As you're writing your method section, keep in mind that the idea is to be as clear as possible. And really, it's in case someone wants to recreate your study. So, for example, my dissertation started out as a replication of a study that had been done. And, I was fortunate that I could go to their method section, the original authors, guys named Mazer and Hunt from Clemson, and see pretty much what they did. And I actually was able to contact them and get their full on methodology, the materials they used, everything. They even sent me a piece of equipment they used. So, make sure that you're writing as clear as you can. And keep in mind that it's like a recipe. If someone else wanted to make it and have it turn out just like yours, what ingredients do they need? What order do they need to do it? How much of it do they need? That kind of stuff, right? How long do they cook it? What temperature? Keep that in mind and sort of mimic that as you write up that method section. And again, that is due next week, the end of next week. So this week, week 8, there's nothing due this week. By the way, I know you've turned in your literature reviews. I'm still reading through those, obviously, and I'll have those back to you by the end of this week so that you can, really potentially file them away and wait until it's time for the full paper. Or if you want to go ahead and take care of the edits now, that's up to you. But I will point out that we are currently here in week 8 and we're coming up quick. I mean, we're already through 8 weeks and we have fewer weeks to go than we've already done. So the idea is this week you're going to work on the methods section ideally. Next week you're going to collect data and finish up that method section. Then we'll talk about some analysis, and so your results will be due at the end of the first week of April. And then we've got another work week, and then we'll connect those dots, and there's the final paper. So keep in mind, this stuff is coming quick. Also keep in mind that next week we will not have a new video. That's week 9, so that's work week and a chance for you to collect data. So whatever you're going to do for your study, you'll have that handled, I hope, by now, because you should be to the point where you know exactly the kind of study you want to run. Maybe you're still getting some specifics of the plan, of the method in place, but generally you should be pretty clear on what you're going to do. And if you're not, please let me know. I can't stress that enough. Please let me know. I would so much rather work with you right now and in the coming weeks than I would try to get multiple people in the last week. In fact, it just won't work. And I'm telling you that just straight up. You can't do a thesis in a week. I say that. I went to my master's program with a woman named, true name, Honey Comer. I think her mom wanted a stripper, but she did not get one. Honey is one of the most innovative people I know. We graduated. She moved to New York City, got a job for NBC, from NBC, doing product placement in their what's it, primetime lineup shows out of Nowheresville, Tennessee, where we were at. So good for Honey. But unless that's the case, and she was very talented, very skilled. Not saying you're not, but it's not what you want to do. Definitely not what you want to do. And if you're using humans at all, surveys, interviews, that kind of stuff, it can't happen. So make sure that you're thinking ahead, please. I know it's busy. I know it's strange. I know it's different than some things you've done. I know that this is the pandemic, and oh my God, I get it. But the show must go on. And if you're not ready for the show, then you don't star in it. And when you don't star in it, you have to try again. And you don't want to do that. This is your senior thesis. All right. Let me know if you need help. I'm telling you, straight up, let me know. All right, so this week, as I mentioned at the very beginning, we're going to talk about data collection. Now, last week when we talked about methods, we touched on some data collection ideas already. So this should be a fairly brief video, but I do want to hopefully show you some examples of things that would be beneficial to you. So let's zip down here to this week. There's our methods. And here's data collection. All right, let me change this look a little bit to get us where we can see things better. Okay, so with this section, the way I've got this divided up is, again, sort of more of the qualitative, quantitative. I've sort of flipped it here so we can do qualitative first, just to give everybody an equal shake. But the first thing we'll talk about is just interviews again. Now, I'm not going to go through all this because we talked about it last time. And if you're using interviews, you need to go ahead right now. This is where your mind needs to be right now if you're doing interviews. Who am I going to interview? How am I going to interview them? And what am I going to ask them? All right, that should be something that you're fleshing out this week. You should really get it sussed out before the week is done. Send those people emails asking if they'll participate. Now, depending on your study and what you're looking at, you're going to be able to use sometimes your friends even. Now, there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. It depends on the study. So if you want to know how college students were affected by something or how college students use something, and college students, that's fine. That's called a convenient sample, and that's completely part of research. Sometimes that's the way it goes. Now, for other studies, if you're doing more of an empirical, quantitative sort of experiment or survey, you don't want to just use people out of convenience. You want to use a broader, a more representative group. But for you, that's what you need to think about. But go through the list and make sure that you have invited some people, however many you need or want. Make sure that you know when and where it's going to be. What are you going to ask him about? Don't forget to go through the permission, if you need that. Have stuff to take notes, backups to take notes, backups to the backups to take notes. Have those questions ready. Make sure that you're thinking through the etiquette. You're thanking them. You're sending them maybe a thank you email. And let me just hit that for just 1 second. If you're using your friends, that's one thing. And, you can do what you want with that. If you use a professional in the community, and by the community, I can mean, on campus or the larger, the Grand Rapids area or even nationally, make sure that you send that person a thank you email. And here's why. It not just looks good for you, but it looks good for us. And that means Grand Valley. I can only imagine if I were asked, and I wasn't a professor, if I was just a professional somewhere, and someone at Grand Valley said, hey, can I interview you? And I said, okay. And I had a terrible experience. They were late. They didn't have very good questions. It was scattered. I didn't hear back from them until they needed something from me, that kind of thing. Well, what are you going to say the next time someone from Grand Valley says, hey, could I interview you for this project? Probably going to tell them no. And I wouldn't be shy about saying why. And I'd probably tell them your name. So, don't do that. Don't sort of spoil it for other people. I know you're seniors and you know how this game sort of works. And I don't think you would do that anyway. But it's easy to sort of not mean to be an ass, but get distracted because of all the things that you have to do and not take that extra 30 seconds or 2 minutes to type out, dear so-and-so, thank you again for the interview. It was very beneficial. I greatly appreciate it. All the best. Your name. I mean, that's it. That's all you need. You don't need anything elaborate. And then, of course, the last thing on this list is to set aside time for yourself at the end of the interview. Don't just go from one to the next or one to work or one to a class. Give yourself at least a few minutes afterwards that you can do the data dump that we talked about, where you just write everything down. Now, when we're going through this, we can just hit these briefly, but make sure that you think about some things that others would skip over. One is to meet the expectations of the interviewee in terms of your appearance. So again, if it's your friends, that's one thing. If it is college students in general, that's another. So for example, at the speech lab, I tell my consultants to dress somewhat professional, but stay relatable. I don't want them to come in, looking like they're going to a wedding or something. I want them to look like they're capable and they're competent, but also they're not stuffy and that students can actually talk to them. So we like to find that medium. It doesn't always work, but we give it our best shot. Make sure that you arrive early. Don't have them waiting on you. Do your homework, meaning see what you can find out before you ever meet with them so that you can take those questions off the list. It's sort of like in my classes, this one is no exception. When I put together a syllabus, I'll take 3, 4, 5 days to write up the syllabus so that I feel like it's complete. And I miss things from time to time. I'm first to admit that. But few things in this world irk me more than to have a student ask me a question that is in the syllabus. And you don't want to be that kind of person with an interview, right? So how long has your company been in business? Did you look on our website? Because it says like established. It's part of the title, So you might want to do a little bit of homework before. You see there, engage in small talk to put the interviewee at ease. Let that play itself out the way that it naturally does. What I mean is not to waste time at the beginning, like, so how are you? But, if you are interviewing a professional who's done this before and time is valuable to them, you don't need much of this. It might just be a quick, oh, thank you so much for doing this. Is there anything you need? Anything I can get you before we get started? Okay, great. Do you mind if I record? Okay, wonderful. Anything you want to ask me before we start? Nope. Okay, let's go. But if it's someone that's super nervous, you might need to put them at ease a little bit. When they're in an interview setting, they've probably not been there before or often. And especially if they don't know you, it might sort of feel awkward. So do your best to make it not awkward. It's sort of like doctors with bedside manner. Our job as an interviewer, especially qualitative researchers, is to have that sort of same bedside manner. I had a fun story. I had a mole on my foot. This is like 2 years ago. And I go to the dermatologist and he's looking at it. And he says, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and remove it and we'll send it off. And I said, okay, it's fine. And so as he's removing it, he asked me, does anyone else in your family have skin cancer? Think about how that question was asked. Does anyone else in your family have skin cancer? Like, it's a given that you do. Does anyone else? And it turns out I was fine, but I nearly just, tripped myself. I mean, it was terrible to hear somebody say that while they're cutting you. Don't let yourself sort of get in that trap. Don't make the interviewee feel awkward if you can avoid it. Also, avoid leading the interviewee. In other words, I don't want you to ask questions in a way that hopes to get at the answer you're looking for. There's different ways to do research, but no matter how you do it, the one thing that you can't do is manipulate data to give you the answer that you want. That's true for quantitative and for qualitative work. And for qualitative work, the way that would be done isn't necessarily, cheating in terms of, oh, well, they said this, but I'm going to take that out and pretend they didn't say it. No, what you could do, though, unethically, of course, is to say things like, oh, well, I know that wasn't the greatest thing, but it probably wasn't the worst now, was it? Well, I mean, it wasn't the worst, but it, definitely wasn't the greatest. Okay, but there's been worse things that have happened. Yeah, there've been worse things. That's fair to say. Okay, great. And so then in your paper, you're like, it wasn't the most ideal situation, but it wasn't bad at all. They said they've experienced much worse. And then you make it look fine when in fact their answer to you was no, it wasn't a great thing. It wasn't a good thing, whatever it is. So try to get the bias out, even though it can be tough. And hear me on this. This is one mistake young researchers make, and I did a lot. You should not feel like if you don't find something meaningful or significant, if you're doing quantitative work, that you have failed or that your project doesn't matter. That is not the case at all. I mean, if I do a study on, I'm just looking around my room, I have Diet Coke sitting in front of me. If I do a study as like a hard science person on Diet Coke and I'm looking to see if it is connected to, anything in the human experience, dementia, and I find that there is no relationship between Diet Coke and dementia, Well, I haven't found anything significant, but at the same time, the absence of a significant finding is significant, right? Now I can tell people, yeah, well, I mean, Diet Coke's probably not great for you in other ways. I drink it a lot, but if you're worried about dementia, don't be. There's other liver and kidney problems to deal with, but it's that kind of thing. Just because it's not what you hoped for or what you thought would be groundbreaking, it's fine still. It's fine. The F idea there. Be aware of your face, right? The RBF, or what's known as the resting bitch face, or what I like to call the Tucker Carlson. If you don't know Tucker Carlson, let me show you what I mean. I'm going to use a few different examples today. So if I can get over here, let's look up Tucker. Whoops, I can't type when it's up elevated. I'm not even going to put anything behind his name. I'm just going to put his name in. And it's sort of this. It's a little bit of this. This is the smug Tuck. This is the I think I'm cool Tuck. He's got one, though, that is like primo Tucker Carlson. Let's go ahead and put in confused. There it is. It's this, right? So he'll ask a question. Can you believe that some researchers think that when they don't find something meaningful, that it is in fact meaningful? When he does this dumbass look on his face. The reason I bring this up isn't to be political or to take a side left or right. By the way, I'm a lefty. But it's to simply point out that when you are giving an interview or performing an interview, be aware of what your face looks like. And be as empathic as you can. So, if you're talking to someone about something happy, great, you'll want to match that. If they're giving you something, sad, their answer is some loss in their life, don't sort of, keep the smile going because that's what you do. Try to be as aware as you can without distracting yourself. And not everyone needs to even worry about this. I have one though. I know I do. When I am listening to people, sometimes I look angry. If you see me walking across campus, I guarantee you I will look angry. It's not that I am, it's that I have somewhere to go and I'm getting there. I live in part by, I have a lot of things that I live by in terms of sayings or mottos, but one is to walk with determination, walk like you're going somewhere. And that's what I do. And so when I walk, I'm just sort of, I'm on it. I got to go somewhere. Don't let that come in here. All right. Even again, if you're recording, make sure you're taking lots of notes and remember that you're representing more than yourself. That's where Grand Valley comes in. So this is the data collection. All right. For interviews. Now, when we get to data analysis next time, we'll talk about what you're going to do with these responses. And that's when we're going to sort things out into different categories, into themes. But for now, just get the data and then start to think about how it makes sense and what you're finding that it appears meaningful to you. And really that's the key. And we'll go through the details next time. All right. Number 2 here is observations. Some of you might do studies that simply require observations to take place. This is, kind of a neat approach to doing research because it doesn't require you to do a lot of interacting. Now, as you see there, observations can take 2 major forms, and that's intrusive and unintrusive. And, you always want to make sure that you're keeping good records. So as you look through here, intrusive observation simply means a person is observing people and that they are aware that they're being observed. So, this is if you are doing like a child psychology study and you want to see how kids play. Well, you would take them into a lab setting that's set up like a playroom, with toys and stuff. And you put some kids in there and there's a mirror on the wall, but on the other side of the mirror, it's one-way glass. We have these at Grand Valley. We have a couple of rooms like this. And you're doing an intrusive observation. Now, of course, they wouldn't know, the kids, but their parents do. That's the important thing there. Or it could be, as you see on the screen, It can include informal discussion about what's being observed, but it's not necessarily required. So this could be if you are people watching, if you will, and you're looking for something specific, and then you observe something, some behavior, and you make a record of it, and you think it means something. You might ask the people that you're watching if it in fact meant what you thought it meant. So an example of that might be like touch, how people touch one another. And so if you are, in America, for example, and you see people holding hands, you might assume that they are significant others. They're in a relationship with each other. And you may then ask them, hey, sorry to interrupt. I don't mean to bother you. I'm just doing a study. I see you're holding hands. Are you two in a committed relationship? And they may tell you to get lost. They may say yes. They may say no. But, that's what you're going to document, whatever answer you get. But that's all that means, is that you observe and then ask if you are observing something correctly. Now, again, they could lie to you. Who knows? But it's the way that you would do this sort of research. Unintrusive observations, which to me are better because it's completely absent of any potential bias on the part of the participant. So, if you bring people into a lab setting and you're watching them interact, they know they're in a lab setting, and so their behavior is probably going to be modified by simply being in that lab setting. And you'll have to determine on your own how much of a difference that may or may not make. So if you bring people in and you have them do a focus group on, racism, and you have someone in the group you think is a racist, and suddenly they're just, oh no, I think diversity is wonderful. We blah, 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 blah. Now, do they really think that? Probably not. But are they saying that because they know somehow that's what you need or want to hear? Potentially. So you'll want to be careful with that kind of stuff. There are some examples, as you see down there. The intrusive would be job shadowing, sitting in on a group meeting. So we see this a lot on campus. Job shadowing is very common. Sitting in on a group meeting. So full disclosure, I'm a recovering alcoholic, and I've been sober for over 4 years now. And I used to go frequently to AA meetings. And at almost every meeting on campus, there was someone there to observe. And it wasn't, to make sure we didn't get drunk and go crazy. They were there to observe because they were from like a psychology class or something like that. And it can make the behavior a little different. But in that particular group, I thought I was in rough shape. And you go in there and you've got, guys in their 50s, 60s, a couple women too, who are just in really bad shape, and they could care less if someone is in there or who they are. They just are going to say what they're going to say. Maybe I thought about it differently because I'm a professor, and it was sort of like, well, we're connected through Grand Valley, so I should be careful. But generally, it wasn't an issue. So that's intrusive because they have to tell us why they're there. They can't just come in and pretend to be, someone that needs a support group. Now, unintrusive could just, again, be sitting around and watching people. So I'll get into this a little more in a few minutes, but I did a study. It's kind of funny. It's connected to alcoholism. I did a study while I was in my doctoral program, which was before 4 years ago, about how people, and you see it there, touched each other on Bourbon Street in New Orleans. And so you'll see that you need to take field notes. And what I did, I literally went to different bars in New Orleans, and I sat with multiple drinks and a notepad, and I had a code book set up, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. But I had my code book set up, and I just observed people touching one another on Bourbon Street. I wanted to know who initiated touch more in opposite sex, or what at least appeared to be opposite sex dyads. So if a man and a woman were walking together, who initiated touch first? Now, if I couldn't see who initiated touch, I might just note that there was touch, but I don't know who did it. If I saw someone break off touch, I could document that. But it was just a strange weekend. So you go down and you're just watching people. I mean, it's kind of the best study ever in some ways. And you got credit towards your PhD. So What you'll want to do with that, though, is to make forms ahead of time. And it can really depend on your setting. If you use a paper form or electronic notes, that kind of thing. I did paper because, I have like an iPad, but I didn't want to use that because I'd have to charge it. And, I don't know if you've ever been to Bourbon Street, but you're going to get stuff spilled on you and you don't want electronics. So, paper seemed to be the best there. But this is a really interesting and fun approach to doing research. And it's something that you can do without feeling like you're putting yourself in an awkward situation. Now, I will say that while I was there, that I did it over 2 days, probably 3 to 4 times, somebody would ask me what the hell I was doing. And they were kind of like, "What are you looking at my girl?" That kind of thing, because they're drunk. And it was like, "Oh, no, actually, here's what I'm doing." And I explained it, and nobody got angry. A couple of them were just like, "Okay, nerd," and kind of walked away. But it is what it is. It was fun. And you could do this in a lot of different places, whether it's outside at a park, just want to spend the day out in the sun, at a mall, you name it. Of course, keep social distance and wear your mask. All right. Number 3, now we're moving out of quantitative and we're moving out of qualitative and moving into quantitative. So as we discussed above, an experiment is going to use a pre and a post test to measure the change that might or might not happen between the situation before an intervention and then after the intervention. And so you can also call this a repeated measures design, where you're going to measure the same thing but at different times. And that's essentially what we're doing here. So what you'll want to kind of keep in mind is that, as I mentioned before, use an established test when possible. Don't go and make your own survey unless you just have to. And sometimes you just have to. I've had to before. And let me just pull up a couple other things. Let's go. Pull up a syllabus from another course. So there's a, well, that is not at all what I thought I wanted. There is a very popular, sure, I guess. Wow, don't know what that's all about. There's a very popular survey out there called the PRCA 24, which is the Personal Report of Communication Apprehension. Hey, Tucker. And I'll show you what that looks like. Maybe. Wow, there it is. Gosh. So this is by a guy named Jim McCroskey, who is the most published, there we go, most published comm researcher ever. I'm going to also pull it up over here because what I've done, and I'll show you how you can do the same thing. PRCA 24. So here's the entirety of the PRCA 24. You see it there. There's 24 questions. Let's blow this guy up. And you've got the directions at the top. Great, no problem. It tells you the scoring criteria. People are going to mark 1 if they disagree strongly, 5 if they agree strongly, and then everything in the middle. Then you would cut it right there, hand it to the people. You'd add in some demographic questions, age, sex, race, whatever you need to know. And then that's all you would give them. But now this version tells you how to score it. There are some out there that will score it automatically. But here is the coding for it. Now, what this does is it gives a full report of your communication apprehension in not just one, but multiple settings. And you see them here: group discussions, meetings, interpersonal interactions, public speaking. So if I just wanted to know about your public speaking anxiety, I can just take out these items, 19, 21, 23, and then, 19 really through 24. Those are those. Now they're listed in this way, like 18, that's just his standardized score. and then you subtract these items and then add these items. And the reason it's that way is because they're using what's called a reverse code. And so some of these questions, let's look at these, like 19 compared to 20. 19, I have no fear of giving a speech. And so if you are really nervous, you're going to put a 1. Number 20, certain parts of my body feel very tense. Certain parts of my body feel very tense and rigid while giving a speech. So if that's true, strongly agree, you're going to put a 5. What they'll do here is reverse code those so that really the lower the score, the less anxious you are, and the higher the score, the more anxious you are. But if they asked everything in the same format, sort of a positive question, I love to give speeches, strongly agree, disagree. I enjoy speaking in front of others. I am a fan of public speaking, like all that, they would catch on and they'd probably go down and just 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, or 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. You've seen this happen. You probably have done it. I've done it before. So if you mix it up like this, it keeps them on their toes, if you will. And so again, I could just pull out these key items that I want to know for the public speaking score. And that is what we have here. These are the big 6 that they were highlighting. And so I made my own scheme. I probably reworded things slightly, but this is very well established. I don't know if they have given us okay, so they didn't give us the, what's called the validity and reliability ratings. I don't think. No, but they've given us the citation down here when this was created, and that will have it in there. So we could look it up if we needed to, but it's very, it's right here. Highly reliable, alpha regularity 0.9. So that's really good, really there. As long as it's above 0.7, you're solid. Very high validity, but it doesn't give us a score for that. That's, again, it is measurable. So for example, if you wanted something like this, but didn't need all 24, you just wanted a 5, 6, 7 question item set, pull it out and do it. Now, there are some things we'll need to do if you're breaking apart a scale that's not been broken and published, and that is do some validity and reliability checking. But again, don't let that scare you or make you feel like, oh yeah, I'd rather just do something that's clean. It's really nothing extra for you to do. All you need to do is find the actual larger survey like this that you want to use. Say, these are the questions that I think will work from that, and then let me know, and we'll take it from there. What we can do is I can check over and see if there's what's called face validity, which means it makes sense on its face that this is going to measure what you intend for it to measure. Then you can distribute the survey and wait till you get in, 20, 25 responses. And then we'll run some stats on it to see if it is accurate, if it's reliable. And that's all we need. And that's really the way research works. It can happen on a much bigger scale, but for us, this will be fine. Okay. Oops, too far. Now, the reason I bring that up for a lot of these, really, because we're going to go to surveys and questionnaires, but we're kind of taking them on together. What we're going to do with this, if you found those 6 questions, and it's what I do in my public speaking courses, I give this to the students on the very first day that we meet. The very first day. I don't want the class to be reflected in their responses. I want them on the first day before they've taken any full-on speech class from me. How nervous are you? And then toward the end of the semester, the last 2 to 3 class meetings, I'll give it to them again. And by that time, they've kind of forgotten what exactly this thing was doing, but it'll just be like, hey, fill this out for me. And then that will allow me to compare, the pretest before we did the class. The class is the intervention. It's like the big experiment that lasts 16 weeks. And then I can do the post-test, and then I compare those two and see what the differences are. And ideally, I can say that I'm doing a pretty decent job with helping students deal with their anxiety if it is in fact lower than it was at the beginning. Now, let's say that you can't find anything that does exactly what you need, and that's possible. In that case, you want to make your own survey, and we'll still need to do some math on it, but that's no big deal. So what you'll see here are just some examples of things to keep in mind. 3 big ones. Stay simple. So ask questions in the simplest form and using plain language. So like the first item, don't do this. Please rate each item here from your favorite one to your least favorite in descending order, considering how you have used each one in the past at some point. What? No, say that differently. First, consider how you've used each of these items. Then, or second, rate your favorite item as a 5 and your least favorite as a 1. No ties, please. That gets it. I mean, that's easier for people to comprehend than the first one. So stay simple, then stay short. These are the 3 S's. The longer the question is, the more opportunity that participants have to get lost, and you're not going to have very accurate responses. So instead of saying, I want you to think about using glass cleaner. Is there a brand that you prefer? Is that brand, because it has fewer streaks, is there a brand that you always buy? Or which brand of glass cleaner do you prefer? There you go. And if you want those other ones, you could ask those in separate questions, because that's the 3rd S, single. Stay single. You've heard of double-barreled questions. That's what you want to avoid. So a double-barreled question is one that has 2 within it, like, what was your favorite subject in school in which you did well? So now you want me to think about, okay, when I was in school, my favorite subject was, I don't know, history. Okay. Did I do very well in history? I did, but what if you didn't? And it was sort of like, I didn't really do well, but I learned a lot. I liked my teacher. It was very interesting. But I probably did the best in English. Okay, that's separate. So you don't want to confuse people. Separate it. What was your favorite subject in school? What subject was your best? If it's the same, then that might be the whole test that you're looking for. You may just want to know, is there a correlation between high performance in a class and a preference toward a class? That's simple. I mean, I remember I made, an A in, what was it? Badminton. That was not my favorite class. I mean, it was just, it's badminton. So, man, make sure that you keep it simple, short, and single if you need to write these up. Show you a quick example of that. Let's see if we can grab, I'll put it in this folder or not. No, that's okay. Let's try real quick. Public speaking empowerment scale. Yeah, there's the data for it. 2019. What is this one? Nope. That's not it. Well, that's okay. I won't spend a ton of time looking for this. But I had to come up with my own scale. Oh, there it is. I think I just put it at the end. Yeah. And so I needed to come up with something, a public speaking empowerment scale, and there wasn't one out there. So again, I just went very simple. I based it off of the PRCA 24 and structure. But when giving a presentation, I'm able to influence others. When giving a presentation, all of these, look, when giving a presentation all the way down to here, and I kept them in an order because I wanted the audience to get into that groove that everything they're about to respond to is when giving a presentation. Then we move over to, I am likely to volunteer for a speaking role. I'm comfortable speaking. I would apply for a job that requires speaking. Public speaking is a normal part of life. And then everything else went to demographics. There you have it. So, just keep it nice and simple. This uses a Likert. It's technically called a Likert, but no one says that. A Likert scale where you strongly disagree to strongly agree. Some people will make this a 3-point scale. Some will make it a 4-point scale and take out the neutral option. Some will make it 7 points. This is a 5, which is the most common. There's nothing that's confusing about it or complicated about it. Most people, regardless of background, and I was looking at college students, so they are more educated than the average person. should work pretty well. And by the way, those statistics that we'll need to run if you do this would sort of be here. So this is where I assumed what I was measuring. Influence was going to be measured with these items, confidence by those, agency by those. So I did some testing with it. The results about validity and reliability, you see them there. And here's how things loaded. So it did work. Basically with this, you want things to load. It was called a loading factor. For validity on a 0.4 or higher. And so you see everything's a 0.6 something or higher. And then Cronbach's alpha, which you may have heard of, that's your reliability. You want this to be at a 0.7 or higher, and everything was good there too. So, we can do these things. It looks a little complicated, and it can be your first few times, but that's why I'm here. And I actually enjoy this stuff. Okay. Let's slide it back over. Now, we've pretty much already done all of this. The 3 S's above, so important. This is your surveys, your questionnaire. There's nothing new here that we have talked about. I guess the only stuff that is here that we need to just quickly address is administer the survey to about 50 people and check for correlations of responses. That's ideal. We can move with 25 and be okay. I mean, 50 is sort of the standard rule if you're going to go on out to 300, 500, 1,000 or more people. But these statistics programs, again, if you're not familiar, don't worry. That's why I'm here. Okay. Last is content analysis. I've mentioned this briefly because we talked about observations, and that dealt with observing humans and their behavior. Content analysis, as you know, does not involve humans. It involves documents, artifacts, things like that, things that you can look at, read, and go from there. For us, the code books look exactly the same. And so what I want to do here is just make a quick code book. So let's say that we were doing that study that I mentioned. Let's take all this stuff out. Go ahead and think about what you would need to know. I'm just going to hit insert, and I'm going to put in a table. And so I'm going to think about, touching people, males, female dyads, or at least those that appear to be. And I need to know about who initiated touch, who broke off the touch, what kind of touch it was, and let's say if I'm able to tell the duration of the touch, just as an example. And then I can just pull that down as far as it'll go. And so, I would actually always add an extra column. So insert columns to the left, because this column can just be your participant numbers, and you don't need to know their names or anything, obviously, but it helps keep things cleaner as you go through your whole process. So then you could keep on going, and then up here we could put initiation. Oops. Let's move this guy over. Of course, it doesn't matter. It's just an example, but initiation, who broke it, what was the type, and then duration. And so, I would just go through here, and if I'm watching this, and I could even type this out and then print it blank, and as I'm sitting in a bar in New Orleans, you could just kind of put, the male initiated it. I don't know who broke it. It was hand, and then the duration was, let's say it's unknown, because I don't know. When I saw them, they were holding hands, and when they were out of my view, they were still holding hands. I saw them start to hold hands. And so I could go with that. And then it could be, who initiated what? Female, break, not applicable, the type. We could even butt smack. Let's say she just, walked by and smacked him on the butt. That's cool. Move this over so we can keep everything on a line. And then the duration, I could just put instantaneous. She smacked it and that was it. There was no more. Now, what I might also do is if, let's say, and you've seen stuff like this, 2 people are walking. One of them smacks the other one on the butt. They're a couple. The other one grabs their hand, laughs, smacks it oh, you're bad, and then holds their hand. Oh my, right? So now we might come over and just take this out and continue. So female initiated the butt smack. It was instantaneous. The male, that's not applicable. Hand grab, instant, and then we could put female. Actually, we could say the female broke away, like, let go of my hand, and then she initiated it again, and we don't know what happened at the end. And then it could be a hand hold, and then it was unknown because they continued out of sight. So, I mean, it's up to you how you want to do this. That's the great thing. This makes sense to me, but if this doesn't make sense to you, do it differently. The code book is something that you're going to be able to, it's like speaking notes. Nobody really needs to see it in its raw form. Now, eventually, if you publish something like this, you'll probably clean it up and make it a little bit more reader friendly, and that can come later. But for your instantaneous observation, this is the data collection, right? And so with that, you're in the moment. You don't have time to write out like, the partner who appears to be female grabbed the male's hand. Suddenly she pulls away. Then this, like, you don't have time for a narrative. And so just something like this can work. But again, let's say that you write all this out the way I just did it because you're trying to move fast. Then you go back to scanning for another observation and you don't see one. That's when you might take a moment and either write down what you saw, or you've got it numbered here, right? This is number 2. So maybe you take out your phone and hit voice memo, and for entry number 2, the female did this, and then the male responded in this way, and then the female responded to that response by blah, 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 right? And then as you go back in data dump, you're going to pull out that recorder. You're going to see what you said about these different numbers and save it just as like, CA2, content analysis 2, content analysis 6. And now you're going to have all that information that otherwise you wouldn't remember just through a code like this. But that is the idea of the code book. Okay, next week, as I said, we're going to talk about analysis and results, and we're going to figure out how to make sense of all of this information that you're gathering, either through interviews, survey work, whether that's an experiment or a general survey, questionnaire, and we're going to really see how this work will pay off. The more data you can collect, the better. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I would rather have more information than I need than to need more information than I have. And so go ahead and see what you can find out there. So shooting back up to the top real quick before we sign off, just want to highlight that. Oops, still going. There we go. The data collection handout is what we just looked at. We talked about it for both quantitative and for qualitative. Next week is a work week where you can collect data. What I may do is go ahead and post the video for results and analysis next week. That way, if you happen to get finished sooner with your data collection and you want to go ahead and move on, I'm not going to hold you up, but don't feel like that's going to move up any due dates. It's not. So this week, there's nothing technically due. Just continue to work. I will get your lit review feedback to you by the end of this week. Next week is a work week, so go collect data, but also turn in the methods section. So review last week's video or 2 weeks ago video. Now, well, no, it was last week's video for more on the methods. If you have questions, of course, on any of this, let me know. And just don't get behind. It's going to be so much easier and better. You're going to have a better time. You're going to have a better product if you keep up with this. So if you're behind, really do work hard to get caught up, and I hope you stay that way. Again, last, if there's anything I can do to make this process easier or clearer or more meaningful to you, don't hesitate to let me know. All right? If you have questions, hit me up, and otherwise, I'll see you next time. Have a good one.